Welcome back to another episode of the SevereMMA Hangout. Here, my name is Andrew McGahon, and today joined by Fig O'Farrell from FightHounds.com, my original stomping grounds, and Setanta Ireland as well. Fig, I know you feature quite prominently on their podcast as well. Last night, we saw the return of BattleZone to Dublin, to the Regency Hotel, a venue which I am actually quite fond of now. Any venue as close to Dundalk gets 2 thumbs up from me, straight off the M1 motorway. As a man who, I don't want to say lives for these events or loves these events, I know there is something different. There is something different about an Irish MMA event. What did you think of it last night?
First off, thanks very much for having me, Andrew. Been a long time coming, the hangout, and also people watching the video can see your tan just in the door from Brazil, and not from Chartbusters. So congrats on that. But yeah, to kick straight into it, we had another great event last night in BattleZone 12. Big fan of the Regency as a venue, and yeah, Jesus, it was a great card. You know, you see these BattleZone cards, and they're absolutely stacked with fights, and then it's kind of blink and you miss it. You know, before you know it, it's all over, and you're looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, there's definitely and.
Hello? Yeah, Grant. Just doing a podcast now. Yeah.
Well, here we go. Back up and running. Send this link to Fig as quick as possible. So for those of you that are only tuning in now or watching live through the SevereMMA.com Facebook page or website, I have to say, preview for the show, we're going to break down BattleZone 12, which happened last night in the Regency Hotel. Some great amateur fights capped off with an excellent pro fight. Then we're going to look a little bit at the other local Irish MMA events that are circulating the scene at the moment, both in the south and the north of Ireland. Safe MMA as well. We saw the first ever Safe MMA fight happen in Ireland officially. Fergus is back with us now. I was just telling people what we're going to be looking forward to in this show, Fergus. And professionals that are signed with organisations such as BAMA or Cage Warriors, or professionals that are having to go further abroad to get fights. Irish Wars of the past, Irish Cards of the past, and then a quick look at the UFC last night, including Frankie Edgar and Cub Swanson. So Fergus, you're back now. I think that was my fault on my end, so I'm sorry about that. So back to, I don't know if you heard me before we got cut off. Jack Sheridan, lovely flying knee in the 3rd round. Do you think the stoppage was a little bit early, or is it all right? It's only a few extra shots.
Yeah, what a way to kick off the night. You know, it was a really good back and forth battle between Jack and Alan. Alan Kavanagh, yeah. And then just out of nowhere, the flying knee, and then Jack piled on the pressure with the ground and pound, and the towel was thrown in. Yeah, listen, I mean, I refereed underage football games in my day. Referees don't have an easy job, so I'm not going to sit back and say, someone did a good or a bad job. But yeah, it was a bit of a late stoppage, that being said. But it's a tough job.
I know what you mean. You don't want to kind of slay. Peter Lavery is probably the best, and Dave Jones, two of the best Irish MMA officials that we have. I know I've refereed in jiu-jitsu tournaments before. It's a very stressful, thankless job. I've had people accuse me of not being a good referee or making bad decisions and different things like that. So we'll call it as it is. I think it was just the placement of Peter Lavery had his back to John Kavanagh, but we on the footage that we uploaded today, it was actually quite cool. You'd see Barry Oldesby, Andy Ryan, Stephen Larry all jump up at the cage screaming because they could see John Kavanagh where Peter Lavery couldn't. So they're screaming at Peter Lavery to look behind him, but then the towel came into his vision. I think it actually was lucky because Jack Sheridan was going for the guillotine while the towel was thrown in, so it's not as if Jack was kept repeatedly hitting Alan and then the towel was thrown in. So they had kind of disengaged and then he went for submission to cool it off. Speaking of submission, notable performance from debutant Alex Brophy. One of the most depressing post-fight interviews I've ever conducted, actually. He seemed absolutely heartbroken by his performance. He just wasn't impressed with it at all. He's coming from a jiu-jitsu background. Do you think it was the case that he didn't get to show what he had learned maybe in his striking department before his MMA debut?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Andrew. I haven't caught the interview yet, but tried the fight. I know Barry Hannah from Malahide was very disappointed with the stoppage. Whether he has grounds is kind of an argument for another day. I thought that was a good stoppage. Now you can't put an amateur fighter's health, I suppose, at risk. Yeah, Brophy came out, seemed to have the striking advantage. Sorry, Hannah rather came out, seemed to have the striking advantage. I think he landed a good knee of his own. But then Brophy was able to tie up, and if jiu-jitsu is his bread and butter, he used it to get the job done. It was a pretty good armbar, to be honest.
Yeah, it was very good. I thought Barry had actually tapped with his feet beforehand and then struggled and tried to get out of it again. John Redmond, who I spoke to afterwards, had no real problem with the fight. He thought it was a good experience learner for Barry. He went in, he got caught, and he still performed well, showed great heart. I think that John has maybe learned from his own mistakes as a fighter in terms of taking fights, and he's going to pass it on to his students. No more so than Owen Drumgoole, who I definitely think is an Irish MMA prospect, at amateur level at least, that we should be talking about. 3-0 now. He's only been training slightly over a year and a half. Very, very impressive with each and every victory, and he beat a guy who's been around Irish MMA quite a long time in Sean Cogan. Do you think it's a flash in the pan sort of thing from Owen, or is there genuinely more to come?
No, I've been very impressed with Owen, and especially last night. Probably his toughest test competition-wise. Sean Cogan, a guy who's been around a while. Now with SPG, and Drumgoole came out, and the strength of the man is unreal. He had his way in the. Cogan, who obviously great striking background. You saw improvements to his grappling last night, but Drumgoole just overpowered him in the grappling exchanges, and it's going to be a big ask for anyone in the featherweight division to have to deal with that kind of strength. He's the strength of a welterweight. He's just a really, really strong dude.
There's definitely a couple of fights I'd like to see him matched up with in the next year or so. I know he said he wants to go 5-0, and then he wants to challenge for an amateur belt, which I think is actually quite, I don't want to say good, but you see some guys maybe up the north or the south that are fighting for amateur titles with maybe 2 or 3 fights, or 4 fights, 4 wins, 2 wins, 2 losses sort of thing, and there's too many amateur titles going around the place between promotion zone titles and ISKA titles, but that's definitely something for another day. Moving on to the next fight, Franz Malambo, who said his cut down to bantamweight was easier than ever due to his lifestyle change. He's now a vegan. He said the weight just fell off him. He said it was easier getting down to 61, and he felt more energetic at 61 than he did cutting 4 kilos and getting down to 66. So definitely something for fighters to look into. I know Dustin Poirier is sponsored by vegan sort of products and earth-based products. I know Mac Danzig is a vegan himself. There's a lot of MMA fighters that have spoke about it before. But Franz Malambo, the man that everyone talks about for his hands and striking ability, pretty nice guillotine, would you agree?
Yeah, just, interesting when I tweeted out the result. Dean Simmons, who Franz from Jack Mason's gym, who Franz beat on Cage Warriors 1st of March show, just kind of tweeted me back in absolute astonishment that he'd made bantamweight, and just saying how strong he was, and when he was in there with him. So yeah, he was a beast at featherweight, and if he can obviously go down to bantamweight, he's not going to lose any of his speed. If anything, he's faster than most bantamweights with his hands, with his legs, if he can maintain the striking. Now, we didn't see much of the striking last night. It was the guillotine, but also the composure. It's funny, I watched John Kavanagh's GoPro video this morning, and when I was at the event last night, I felt like Daniel Thompson's guillotine, the standing guillotine, seemed to be a lot longer last night than when I watched it today. It actually was it felt like he was in there for an age, but it actually wasn't as long as I thought. And Malambo, at the same time, stayed composed. It was tight. He stayed composed, slammed out of it, and not a minute later was in a guillotine of his own, which forced the fight to come to an end. I
thought John had a very funny comment in that GoPro footage. He said something along the lines of, or that'll work too, when he was trying to talk him out of the guillotine and he just slammed him and his head popped up. Something, I'm wondering what the theory behind that is. Is that John Kavanagh wanting to be able to have quick access to look back over his fights, maybe to rate his own cornering, how he's doing, or maybe because he had I'm pretty sure he had a different person in a different second with him in every night. I know Kiefer Crosby, Paddy Houlihan, Dylan Took, and I'm not too sure. Maybe it was just those three that were doing it. I'm not too sure if he had anyone else. So maybe it's him being able to review it. He's a very methodical, evidence-based man. Definitely something to see. If we see John Kavanagh walking around with a GoPro strapped to his forehead more often than not, we'll know that he's onto something. Your favourite Irish MMA amateur fighter, I think it's fair to say, the co-main event. Thomas Hogan, 8-0 now as an amateur. 3 of those wins, as you told me yesterday, against Keith McCabe. Is it time we see him change down to 4-ounce gloves?
Yeah, well, no journalist has favourites, Andrew, but Keith McCabe is definitely someone who you can't help but admire. How many Irish MMA shows have you been to when the man's not fighting? He just really embodies what the sport is about in this country. Will get in there in a day's notice. Likes to stay busy, and it's great seeing him finally, reap rewards when he got the title last month on Akuma. But yeah, last night he came up short, probably much closer than the other 2 fights. Interesting enough, the first fight was mainly on the feet. I was impressed with Hogan's box. Was able to implement his wrestling game, but you said it yourself. McCabe has a very, very busy bottom game. Very good, very active guard, and could have caught Hogan, but Hogan did well. And when you're 8-0 as an amateur, I suppose there's always going to be questions about when it's time for the professional scene. I mean, I'd say it'll be very difficult to get him a fight. His fight that's on goes 7-0. I'm not sure if it was injuries or what involved bringing over an opponent from the UK. But that being said, there's so many good amateur welterweights in this country. A.O. Daly, Kieran Daly. Obviously Paul Lawrence, who's his teammate and wouldn't fight. You know what I mean? James Brennan, what do you think yourself, Andrew? Do you think it's time for him to step up onto the pro scene?
Well, what he said, it's just probably gone live now on Severe as we're recording this, because it's just, I can see the notification that it's been uploaded here. He said that he reckons it's pro next because no one else wants to fight him. And if just backtracking a little bit, because my phone has been flashing up here a few calls and notifications. Daniel Thompson has commented on Facebook that Did you see this? Graham Severe MMA asking if I wanted out. Did it look like I wanted out? Going for a takedown, made a mistake, and France took the opportunity. I was defending the choke the best that I could. What a joke of a question. Now, I know what you were saying a few minutes ago about how we would not dare criticize a referee because we're not in there where we don't have experience to do it. I would not insult a fighter like that saying that he wanted out. But when Franz had suggested that maybe he felt that he'd give it to him, you know, Chael Sonnen has spoken many, many times. Pro fighters have spoken many, many times about even at the highest professional UFC level, people give off their back. People give off their back and they let a choke go in. People leave a head in, they get choked. I'm not questioning anyone's commitment, but I think for someone to react in a way like that would show that, you know, maybe there is something to a story that we're not seeing the full side of. So apologies to Daniel if you think I was trying to be offensive. I have nothing but respect for Irish MMA fighters, and hopefully we'll sort that out instead of a message. Probably would have been a little bit better. Finally, I'm a wee bit annoyed about that. I caught off balance there. Stephen Cole and Mick Brennan. Mick Brennan seems to have, he's either giving horrible leg kickings or taking them. Seemed like both of them had a little bit of damage done. But what do you think the fight ultimately came down to? A deserved win for Stephen Cole, or was Mick Brennan having a bad night?
Very good question, to be honest, Andrew. I was impressed with Stephen Cole. I don't know if I'd say I was unimpressed with Mick Brennan. I just thought it was a really, really 50-50 fight going into it. You know, Cole, 4 wins by submission. He's just so tricky on the ground. You know, Mick Brennan, obviously his strength would be his boxing. You know, never really got it going on the feet. Landed some nice combinations in the first round. You know, and it was a strange kind of fight because Brennan appeared to have better wrestling. You know, seemed to be able to take Cole down at will. But then, what did you think about Brennan's takedown game? And you know, it almost kind of looked like he didn't want to get caught in Cole's guard. You know.
It was tricky because Mick Brennan was one of the, in my opinion, he's a great striker. Very exciting to watch. He always scraps, whether technically he may not be the best striker. He comes from a good striking gym and he always puts it out there. I think Stephen Cole, on the other hand, you rarely, and you saw Brian Stan talk about it last night, I think, on the UFC, about how good a guard it is for MMA. Stephen Cole utilising a butterfly guard and trying to set it up to use sweeps or to get him into his guard, to attack heel hooks, to attack, it's a type of a straight arm lock where I noticed a few times he was grabbing just underneath here, trying to latch it up and then extend it like that. I've been caught in it a few times training, but I've never seen it used in MMA, and I thought it was close at one point looking at Mick Brennan's face. I think, though, coming down to it, and as well, what I should point out is that Stephen Cole is coming from Hill and Gracie, Ireland. His jiu-jitsu coach is a guy called Brian Barney Coyle. In my opinion, has the best close guard in Irish BJJ outside of black belts. Literally the most flexible guard you've ever seen. Keeps them there, works them down, breaks down their posture, and submits them. So maybe it's the teacher passing it on to the student. I think his fighting style is a little bit more conservative. Mick Brennan probably was aware of the guard and what it would possess. Although look back to the Liam James fight, Stephen Cole had trouble submitting Liam James from similar positions. So I definitely think Cole is pretty dangerous from there. But the leg kicks that he was dropping on Mick Brennan as well were pretty nasty. Some of his striking I thought was very good in terms of setting up takedowns. Not that much anymore, I don't think. Anyway, we see guys use their hands to set up takedowns as opposed to just shooting on a takedown when they think they can get a takedown. Cole did it a few times yesterday and was very impressed with that. But as a segue to lead us on to the next topic, what other pro featherweights in Ireland that aren't signed to major organisations are going to be able to fight Stephen Cole for this title? Where do BattleZone go from this? Is it a problem in Irish MMA that these two and Conor Dillon, off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anyone who's a pro that can challenge for a belt that isn't signed for a title?
Well, the name that was on my list last night was Kieran O'Brien from Trials. I know he has fought for Cage Warriors before, but to the best of my knowledge, that deal isn't exclusive. That being said, it was kind of a strange situation in that if so, hello.
Yeah, are you there? Can you see me?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thought I lost you. My view changed. So yeah, it was kind of a strange situation for Kieran because Kieran, or sorry, Mick goes out and beats Sean Tobin on BattleZone a year ago to claim the featherweight title, a little over a year ago, or a little under a year ago. Then he just gets taken apart by Kieran O'Brien on New Year's Eve Cage Warrior show, and it's kind of a situation where no one really wants to see that fight again on BattleZone. Kieran O'Brien versus Stephen Collar. I think that's a good fight and that's an interesting fight, and that'll be one that would get me excited. See how O'Brien's ground game has improved. See what if Carl have any answers for the striking, especially after his improved striking last night. But had Brennan defended the title, O'Brien was kind of at a bit of a stalemate because there was no real fights for him. Connor Dillon's another opponent, but after that, all it takes is one injury, and that's a whole fight cancelled on a show that may only have one or two pro fights. So, yeah, bottom line is there's not enough guys ready to challenge for these titles.
It's definitely something that I would rather see. I don't want to say eradicated, but I definitely want to think more of I'm not saying that signing with Cage Warriors is bad, because it's great. We've seen it elevate so many pro careers. But look at Alan Philpott last night fighting in Poland, Artem Lobov heading off to fight in Poland. I think it's a case of, I think everything together is linked. The crowd at BattleZone last night, while it was great, I think Irish MMA crowds can be deceiving. If you had a got up from where we were sitting, looked back and looked around the arena, you would have thought, oh, there wasn't many people here. But then you see that people actually are in between, maybe going to the jacks.
No, don't break your cunt.
And as I said, Wayne Fagan and Barry Oglesby both doing shows in Dublin. This Google Hangout is breaking my heart. Jordan Breen did it first. I think it's been irreplaceable since then. Fergus will be joining us again in 1 second. I've just had to restart the broadcast. If in case it cut out a minute ago, just what I was saying was that because the attendance figures at Irish MMA shows are slightly lower than maybe they used to be, at least down in the south, that these promotions can't really afford to be bringing pros over or putting pros up. And I think it's do you think, Fergus, if you're there, do you think we're in a transitional period of Irish MMA while we're waiting for this current batch of amateurs to turn professional, so that we're stuck with the 9 or 10 fight amateur cards with 1 or 2 pro fights, where in a year or two's time it could be 5, or it could be the same amount of amateur fights with 4 or 5 pro fights to top it off?
Sorry, Andrew, I don't know what happened there, but glad to hear we're back. Just before we get into that, could you just reiterate the point you were making on the crowd, because that's something I kind of I'd have my own, not my own views on, but it's something that kind of confuses me a lot, to be honest.
Yeah, it's like Irish MMA it's rare that you have people there that are there for the fights. They're there to support people and friends, and it's a night out for them. So you may turn up and look at the crowd, and people are in transit either between the bathroom or the the bar, and they're standing watching the next fight. So the attendance actually is usually more than you'd think, because the people are like densely populated, or they could be with someone, or maybe they left because someone has already fought. It's not like you have people that are there as MMA fans from the first fight to the last fight.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so it's probably 70% capacity for all events, because people are waiting for their mate to fight, or their mate has already fought and just want to go to the bar. But it's something I want to ask you about. I mean, people say Irish fans are the best fans in the world. I mean, whoever says that, have clearly never been to a League of Ireland game, has clearly never been to an amateur Irish MMA event. They might be the best armchair fans in the world, might have the highest Sky Sports subscriptions in the world, but like, how much you were over in Vegas, Andrew? How many Irish were reported to have been over there?
11% of all tickets were bought from Ireland, and if I was to guess, I would say there was between 16 to 2,000 people there, 1,600 to 2,000 Irish people there. Now that can be, I don't deny that 1,000 bought tickets from Ireland. I think the UFC, there's no point in them lying about that. It's just a throwaway stat to show the support of the Irish. They've got other things to worry about than trying to big up the support of the Irish. But I do think it was genuine. You have to take into account Irish people that would have went over to Vegas for the experience, Irish people living in America, and then those guilty by association, the Irish Americans, that would, or the American Irish that would don the tricolour and hang out. I do agree with what you're saying. I think it's a stereotype that we have the best fans in the world. We have the best fans in the world when we're winning and when things are going good. And I don't think that we should dwell on that as a negative for too long, because you could argue that it's all of these fans and all of these crowds and the passion and the support that has swayed the UFC to try to do a stadium show here next summer.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree completely. You can't listen. The MMA is out there. It's on people's doorstep. But that's not to say Stephen Call or Mick Brennan or Conor McGregor. If people are make the conscious decision, I just want to watch high quality MMA. Not to say last night wasn't high quality. Sorry, if people makes me want to just watch elite MMA. I only want to watch people going for UFC title shots thereabouts. Then that's fair enough. You can't argue with those people's preferences. But yeah, all in all, I think I do find it a little bit puzzling that after seeing the growth of the sport in this country, that local shows, and even as far as Cage Warriors to an extent, doesn't seem to be getting that kind of a knock-on effect. Yet, however, there would be no issue in selling out the Aviva or possibly Croke Park within 12 months. But as you said, we won't dwell on that for too long. So we'll move on to your next question.
Just from that, I agree with you. I think it's baffling. And the fact is that maybe it's the lack of promotion from the promotions, or from, if you look at Cage Warriors themselves, what I say about fans in transit definitely applies to the Helix, because it has been close to selling out, just a handful of tickets short, but it doesn't look it, because there are people there that are buying tickets. The New Year's Eve is a spectacle. The people are in and out. It's what it has to do, and I think it's a good landmark for Irish MMA. It's definitely getting there, but I agree with you how it's funny that we can assume Croke Park will seat between 60 and 80,000 people. It will sell out, knowing the way Irish get behind things and fanfare. And let's get first things first straight. There aren't 400,000 Gareth Brooks fans in Ireland, but there are 400,000 tickets sold to Gareth Brooks in Croke Park, because it's a spectacle. Did you get your Gareth Brooks tickets? Yeah, I got mine. Oh, I'm buying for 2 nights. Oh, well, then I'm going to buy for 3 nights. And that's how the Irish mentality works. So for Croke Park, the bandwagon will roll and Conor will get a great support. But look back to it before, Cage Contender, Conor got great support. Cage Warriors, Conor got great support. Celtic Gladiator, great support. Maybe he was just an empowering figure back then. But I mentioned the subject of our next topic there, Cage Contender. Seems to be gone, dead in the water. Heard rumours maybe there will be a card coming back sometime next year. I know John Ferguson just likes seeing how Irish MMA is playing out at the minute. And rather controversially, I'm going to go and stick my neck out with this. I think the Northern Irish MMA scene, i.e. Clan Wars and UXC, is performing better than the South. What do you think?
Ooh, yeah, to be honest, Andrew, you would possibly be in a better position to make a judgment on this. Being honest, I don't get up to a whole lot of shows up the north. I've only ever been to one Clan Wars. I enjoyed the Akuma show last year. I've never been to a UXC event. But, yeah, card-wise, they seem to be putting on good pro fights. Some of the amateur fights, in particular, the titles, maybe it's my lack of knowledge of the scene, but they don't always seem to be, the top two guys, or. But one thing for sure is ticket sales is, they definitely seem to be outdoing the Republic with regards to ticket sales. The underdog or UXC, I'm not sure if it was the parent or the child of that promotion, managed to go head-to-head with Cage Warriors last year and sell at the Odyssey, which, if we're being honest, was a good card, but, it was nothing outstanding, It was just very well marketed, and fair play to them for selling at the Odyssey.
Sell out is in exclamation marks there, because I've seen a couple of people say that there was 8,000 people at that event. So there was 8,000 people in the Odyssey for UXC, which is just, 1,600 short of the O2 for the UFC in Dublin. So the figures are all over the place. Photos will always tell a different thing if certain areas are packed and others are not. The most I've ever seen at a Cage Contender, I think, was Cage Contender 11 maybe, or 12 in the National Basketball Arena, the one where Johnny Dargan fought Tim Elliott when Roddy fought Gugarty. I thought that was probably the biggest Irish MMA event that I had attended, just from how big the crowd looked. But aside from that, I definitely think up north, the events, the support is massive. They seem to have the tactic of, for example, if there's a next generation fighter on the card, there's generally 2 or 3 of them, so you pretty much have the entire fan base of the gym that come out and support it in droves. I do think the distance that they have to travel is a big factor. I know it's not too far from places like Belfast to Derry or Ballymena to Belfast and different things like that, so it's a shorter commute distance. You can run a bus, you can get, you wouldn't get massive droves of fans going from Dublin up to Belfast or vice versa. So I think the fact that there are small clubs littered that have willing and ready amateur fighters, be it from Devil's Fight Club, Next Gen, FAI, Team Tara's Derry, Evolve in Derry, Chum Sut, all of those guys are all around. They're all bringing fighters into these cards, and that's, I think, the fact that it's such a densely populated area is what's kind of having the add-on effect. Then you look at Clan Wars. It was a year ago tomorrow, tomorrow a year ago, when Carl McNally hit that mad flying wheel kick, got SevereMMA a massive amount of views just for him pulling off a lucky armbar off a wheel kick. But those cards had electricity, those stories behind them. Whether whatever we say about Alan Philpott, he sells fights, he gets people interested, and he brings a crowd in. So I do think that the North is slightly overtaking the South at the minute. But we'll just have to see. Maybe when more of these guys turn pro, you're going to see a different ball game.
Yeah, that's the hope. I wouldn't be carrying out any post-mortems on the local Irish scene just yet, and especially, one thing I'd like to ask you about is I've heard, oh Jesus, sorry, am I still there?
Yeah, you're there.
Yeah, a lot of amateur fighters, without naming names, have said 2015, and even this has gone back 18 months, have targeted 2015 as the year they're going to make their mark on the pro scene. So, I'd love nothing more than to see that happen. But also as well, since the rule change going back maybe 4 years at this time,
John Cameron's rule change, the no more D class, E class, F class.
Exactly, C class, yeah. Full credit to John. Since that rule change, in a way, the level of amateur fights has just improved absolutely tenfold. So maybe if you look back 5 years, guys who were fighting professionally wouldn't have been were these rules around then. You know what I mean? So that also plays a factor. But now you've got, as the kind of Alex Ferguson class of '92, there's got hope that we'll have an Irish MMA class of 2015 with a lot of guys making their debut, who will go on to have great professional careers.
I think that may be something that you'll be able to use a lot over the next few years. You've coined it here first, the class of 2015. I don't disagree. I just think that there's such a massive amount of amateur talent that we're really going to start to see better fight cards at a professional level in maybe a year and a half's time when these guys make the jump. And then you have the amateurs that are coming through already inspired by these guys. Because if we go back 3 years, and like I'm about to talk about, before we wrap up, we'll just have one more topic on the past. Such great cards in Irish MMA history. We've seen brilliant fights, and hopefully we're going to be debuting a new feature in the next month or two, looking at classic fights and talking about them with maybe some of the people involved. But just to throw one out there that would definitely be the first on my list, John Donnelly and Philip Mulpeter. Only ever seen highlights. I wasn't able to get there that night. Didn't see the full fight. Setanta edited it down to 3 rounds. The 5 fights aren't out there. I'm on a mission to find them and to watch it all and enjoy it. And then if you go even further back, Roddy Gugarty, Roddy Ben Davis, Chris Fields, John Redmond, like Boards.ie was going nuts for Chris Fields and John Redmond. That doesn't happen now, and the reason that it was so good back then is because these were the guys that people were talking about. So maybe in a year or two, the Carl McNallys and the Darren O'Gormans, all of those people. Darren is now a pro. Kieran O'Brien, Sean Tobin, all of those guys are going to be the ones that we're talking about in this way. But I think that we were spoiled for choice because like Chris Fields now knocking on the door of the UFC, Cathal Pendred fighting Liam Shannon in Cage Contender 5, Cathal's now 2-0 in the UFC, Conor McGregor fighting on Cage Contender, Norman Park fighting on Cage Contender, Miles Price winning the lightweight belt. All of these guys seem so good. Paul McVeigh coming back over to Ireland and fighting here. I think that's what just got everyone so caught up in it. And now they're at the higher level. Surely it's only motivating to see that if these guys went through the trial and path, through the same clubs, fighting on the same shows, and now they're fighting in the UFC and are some of the biggest UFC stars in the organization, surely that's a confidence booster for the amateurs in Ireland today.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair play to these guys who've really paved the way. Shown that the progression. From winning Cage Warriors titles to the Ultimate Fighter. That the Irish cliche with not here to take part, here to take over. And our Irish fighters have been so competitive, but going back 5 years, that simply just wasn't an option. It was only a dream. So maybe it's just the fact that the attention just kind of was at where people were always looking towards that dream and seeing, well, who are the guys and who are going to make it to the UFC? And you mentioned like John Redmond, Chris Fields, even John Redmond, John Michael Shield, when that kind of Rush SPG rivalry. Sorry,
John Michael Shield has returned from the wilderness. I don't know if you've
heard that. Here, looking forward to seeing his return. But when that rivalry was at its height, Boards.ie was exploding, literally. Then you also had characters like Henry Fadipe. A lot of people looking at him saying, "Oh, like UFC, watch out," and this kind of thing. So I don't know if we'll ever see those days again because we now have the guys in the UFC. Like Conor McGregor can. We saw this week go on Twitter and talk to a WWE wrestler and get whatever 100,000 shares. So not saying it's a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. The guys who are in the UFC deserve the attention. They've worked bloody hard to get there. They deserve every single bit of attention. But maybe the knock-on effect is that they take slightly defer a small bit of attention away from the kind of the up-and-coming pros and. Maybe that part of it will all, despite the sport's growth, will always remain kind of between a niche community.
Something that I hope, one final thing on that topic that I hope does not happen, is that you saw Thomas Hogan has fought Keith McCabe 3 times. Let's fast forward to 18 months. Both these guys may or may not be pro. Keith McCabe gets a phone call from a promoter. For talk's sake, it's Andy Ryan. He says, look, pro fight opportunity here. It's Thomas Hogan. Do you want to take it? In Keith McCabe's head, he's thinking, I've lost 3 times to this guy. A pro record is much more valuable than an amateur record. Do you think that the oversaturation, the overfighting of guys fighting each other so much at amateur, win or learn, I agree, is all amateur should be about. But look at Keith Cody, okay, massive, massive talent, great fight against Paul Kaiser that he took short notice in 2010. It is a pro fight. He went 0-1, then went back, fought amateur, became one of the best bantamweight amateurs in the country, and then lost his second pro fight. Now he's 0-2 as a pro. You have to wonder what his next step will be. Is it going to be more calculated? You know, 0-3 is an awful start to your pro career, but it just shows maybe he's finding it hard to get these fights because he beasted through everyone at 135 at amateur.
Yeah, you know, it's a very, very good point, Andrew. And, you know, first of all, you know, well, from what I know about Keith McCabe is I don't think he'd have a second thought, regardless of what fight was offered to him. But I know you're just using him as an example for example's sake. It is a valid concern that you know, even, you know, as we were talking about the classic Irish fights, a lot of those guys, hindsight's 2020, but a lot of those guys could have nursed their records better and that kind of thing. You know, even look at Neil Seary. A stumbling block for a long time for him to get in the UFC was people spoke about his record, you know, and despite the fact that his record isn't a true reflection of his talents, of his career, you know, a Sherdog record doesn't tell the full story. So Irish MMA knows that now, and I think you're absolutely right. Fighters may be concerned about that. However, obviously the great hope is that they're not, and even though it's early days, an example of that is the Sprawl 3 card, which sees Sean Tobin go up against Neil Ward. You know, Tobin's 1-1, Neil Ward's 1-0, so a loss for either guy there would be absolutely devastating. Particularly, it's a tough fight knowing that, you know, it's classic grappler versus striker. It's a really, really good fight, and you know, it's great to see guys take those kind of fights.
I think that is going to be one of the fights of the year, to be honest. Neil Ward went through Gavin Kelly, who was a good pro in his debut in March. You know what I mean? And I think that's a really exciting preview of what amateur Irish MMA fighters are going to become as pros. You know, you spend the time at amateur, you do the work, you have the fights, you have the experience. You go pro, you're coming up against a guy who I think it was 3-0 or 4-0 at the time in Gavin.
No.
And Google Hangouts will be the death of me. Fergus, I don't know if you're there or not. We're going to be wrapping it up. Sorry to those that are watching this intermittently with breaks and breaks. We'll definitely rectify it before the next one. As I said before, next guest is confirmed. Sometime in December, we'll be joined by Ariel Helwani from MMAfighting.com. Probably another show in the interim between then, with a fight that's going to be in action pretty soon. So until then, thank you very much for watching. This is the Sphere MMA Hangout. Thank you very much to Fig O'Farrell. You can check out his work on FightHands.com and over at Setanta.com. And until then, see you later.